the atheists like to go after the fundamentalists who defend the Bible as a scientific theory, in that sense when it shouldn't be. And Peterson thinks that you are like taking out straw men there. You're like, you got a katana and you're like, or a baseball bat, and you're just beating the hell out of the straw man.
We're closer to the same page.
Okay. Yeah. If you're a religious thinker, let's say, if you're a serious student of religious thought and a serious philosopher, one of the things you can't claim is that whatever story the Bible is telling is a scientific theory. And that's just self-evident. First of all, like, when was the first scientist? Descartes, Bacon, Newton? Maybe you could chase it back to the Greeks, but no farther than that. And so the idea that whatever the people who conjured up the Old Testament creation account were doing was something akin to scientific theorizing is a mistake that would only be made by people who don't know how to distinguish between different kinds of truth. And so the fundamentalists,
like the difference between literal scientific truth or metaphorical truth, which is something we've talked about on the channel quite a lot. You can read the claim thing if you need a Peterson translation further.
Also, I feel for the fundamentalists, because what they're trying to do, to give them credit, is to maintain a corpus of stories in which an ethos is based. That would be the Western ethos, in this case of Christianity.
Introducing Final Press. It directly brews coffee in your mug to eliminate any mess. You'll no longer...
Because they believe that the ethos is of extreme, in this case of Christianity, because they believe that the ethos is of extreme value. And I also believe that the ethos is of extreme value and that it is nested in those stories. And so they don't like to be confronted by the rationalist, atheist, evolutionary types because it blows the foundation of their ethos apart and they feel that it's worth preserving. But I think, well, yeah.
But it doesn't really, though, right? Because it's the Petersonian point that even if it's not true in the scientific sense, even if you blow it apart in the scientific sense, that's not actually the correct way of analyzing it, so it doesn't blow it apart in truth. It just feels that way because that's the kind of framework that we use in today's world. It's just a purely scientific, materialistic kind of framework, so it like feels painful as if it's blowing up. But to Peterson's points, if you've been listening to him, you're not actually destroying it because that's just not the way you should be thinking about religion.
Yeah, it is worth preserving. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't philosophical problems associated with the manner in which they construct their arguments. But, well...
Subscribe to the Pangbird channel. Subscribe to this channel. Yeah, humble plug there.
Well, but they're still worthy. But it doesn't address the issue. There's a deep issue here that we're not contending with. Here's an example. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think so. I just finished... Well, I thought about it a lot, and I do try to think about where I'm wrong because I would like to figure out where I'm wrong because then I wouldn't have to be wrong anymore, right? And being wrong is actually not a good thing. You fall into a pit if you're wrong.
And this is what I point out in the lecture on skepticism, since you didn't get to see the show, is that being wrong feels exactly like being right. Nobody runs around going, oh, I'm wrong, but I'm going to keep believing this. We all assume that we are correct about a great many things. And it's not so much that being wrong is the thing we're afraid of. I think that being exposed as wrong is the thing we're afraid of.
We're also sometimes...
Well, not just exposed by another person, though. This is an interesting detail. Is you're afraid of your wrongness being exposed by another person, sure, but also being exposed by reality, because you have a false assumption eventually, whether it's another person or it's a problem in your life or it's something material, will eventually catch up to you and make you suffer for your wrongness to some extent. So, there's that.
I was afraid of being wrong because if you're wrong at a deep level, it can really hurt you.
Oh, I agree.
It can really take you apart. And so people don't like to be taken apart. Like if you're wrong about your wife, for example, that tends to be a very painful thing. And that's something that's worth pursuing to try to figure out why that is.
Pan.
That should make you popular. Okay, so one of the issues that I have, and you can respond to this, is that the let's say the celebrity atheist types, because I actually like that phrase, they don't seem to me to be contending with the real issues. They seem
What
to
are
be
the real
going
issues?
Dostoevsky, he's a real issue. Tolstoy, he's a real issue. Carl Jung, 20 books and maybe 15 seminars. He's a real issue. Mircea Eliade. Like, there are some...
So for those of you who don't know what the hell he's talking about, understandably, and this is another one of the things where people get mad at Peterson for not answering the question, what he's saying is that the atheists like to go after the fundamentalists who defend the Bible as a scientific theory, in that sense, when it shouldn't be. And Peterson thinks that you are like taking out straw men there. You're like, you got a katana and you're like, or a baseball bat, and you're just beating the hell out of the straw men. And they're real people. You're not misrepresenting their arguments. It's just not the strongest arguments for the underlying ideas of religion. So he lists a few. Dostoevsky is a Russian author, Crime and Punishment. He talks about why morality is kind of objective and not utilitarian. He talks about something we talk about in another video about the necessity for man is meaning, and it's not just pleasure, and he's great. And then another Russian author, Tolstoy, Carl Jung, who's one of Peterson's favorites, who talks about archetypes and the like, and another author who I don't recognize. But basically, these are the types of religious thought leaders and thinkers that Peterson thinks that atheists, if they were worth their salt, would be talking about, as opposed to, beating the hell out of the fundamentalists over here on the right. Now, atheists would say that those people aren't really the religious people that they're interested in taking down. It's just not really what they're arguing against. But just so everybody understands what Peterson is saying, is that these are the real religious thinkers who need to be dealt with, not fundamentalists.
Serious heavy hitters in the religious phenomenology domain. And my sense so far, I just finished reading all of Harris's books, for example, is he doesn't contend with them at all. And it's like, for me, that's like being an evolutionary biologist and not being aware of Darwin. It's actually a big problem. It's not something you can hand wave away.
Darwin might be a little bit of a stretch, because Darwin created the theory of evolution largely, and these thinkers, while I agree are very important, didn't exactly create the religions. That's more the Bible. So, in fairness, I'm gonna mince words with Peterson a little bit there. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement, but you're right. I don't think you can hand wave it away either, in my mind.
Wait, Jung was a mystic. It's like, sorry, he was about as smart as Friedrich Nietzsche.
I think this gets to basically the same point I was talking about before. The thing that you're objecting to, it seems, is that many of us don't want to address the aspects of religion that you find value in, because we're only focused on, perhaps as I'm talking in the show, from a scientific skepticism perspective of, are there valid and sound arguments that would lead one to conclude that a God exists? My answer to this so far seems to be no. And the apologists, the theologians, they keep presenting the arguments, the teleological arguments, moral arguments, and all these things. They have nothing to do with the phenomenology of religion. They have nothing to do with how this impacts people's lives. This is a question of, is it in fact the case? Is it consistent with reality that there is a God? And is it consistent with reality that there is good reason to believe there's a God? That is where the focus is primarily.
Yeah, so this actually harkens way back to the beginning framing thing, where Dillahunty betrays the fact that he believes reality is purely material. And if that's the case, then in his mind, those claiming the scientific truth of religion is just a completely different arena than the values thing that Peterson is talking about with Jung and with Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Eliade. So to Dillahunty, they're two separate issues. And he's like, that's cool, I'm actually okay with that, but I'm over in this playground, we're just in different arenas. I'm not avoiding anything. It's not like there's another enemy in this arena that I'm ignoring. It's that we're in different arenas. And to Peterson, it's the same damn arena. Because he doesn't think you can separate what's useful and what's real all that easily. So fundamentally, that's what this discussion is about, is what is the nature of reality, really? Is it just the material, or is it the material and also the useful and the what works? And depending on your answer to that question, you will land closer to Dillahunty or Peterson. But despite all of the claim captions, I do think this video went pretty well, so hopefully you all will be seeing it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Really helps me out, really helps out the channel. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.